I'm instructing myself to be brief. Timothy and I are on a time consideration. Whenever I get him to be away from his family on Mother's Day, from his daughter and his wife, I always want to be able to tell them, I'll get your daddy home as early as I can. I'll get your husband back as early as I can. So, and I'm really grateful that we took the time. I'm really grateful Timothy reminded me I had left my tithe in the car, so I had to track him down to get the key to get my tithe. And he reminded me that I've already done 30 minutes. And so I went, okay, well, I did that on purpose because I want to be brief now.
Yeah.
And I'm really grateful that we took the time to talk about the 5 principles and to make our announcements and get input. Generally on Mother's Day for the last, it's really weird, I've been preaching so long. I've been doing this for 40 some years. I'm 66 years old, and I've been officially doing this for 40 some years, and I'm really grateful for the insights that have come to me and through me. And so on Mother's Day, wherever I am, I want to get to who your mother really is and who she isn't. And I want to do it in a different way today. So trust me, I'll get to your mothers within a few minutes. But I want to begin in another way to connect with something that I said earlier. And when I said that, I referred to Jesus as he's us because he believes he's us. He claims, I am you. And I go, how could that be? You were a Middle Eastern man with, as I see you, with caramel-colored skin and black curly hair and dark eyes, and you're beautiful. But you're not chocolate like me, you're caramel, and your hair is not as kinky as mine is, and I was born in 1951, and you were born 2,000 years ago, so how can you say you're me? Like, how can I believe that you're me? And when you say, when you've seen the least among you, you're looking at me. Well, how can that be? If I look at the least in my world, it doesn't look like you. He doesn't look like you. He doesn't act like you. He doesn't talk like you or think like you. So how can he be you? And so I thought for many years that this was, just talk. It's just something he said. Oh, I'm everybody. But not really. Can't be everybody. Like, how can Jesus be us? And how can Jesus be God? God is the Almighty One, the creator of all that is. Jesus says his neighbors pointed out, that's Mary and Joseph's boy. And he stands up in the tabernacle and he reads a scripture that talks about the coming of the manifest child of God, and then he claims that's who he is. Like, that's not who he is. He's Mary and Joseph's son. But he thinks he's one with God and one with all of us. So it's always been a metaphysical, mysterious thing to me throughout most of the years of my life until recent years. And Jesus visited a priest, Nicodemus, and Nicodemus was very learned. He knew all of the Jewish laws and the scriptures and the mysteries of the Kabbalah, and he knew pretty much everything that had to do with spirituality. But he looked at Jesus and went, this guy's got something that I don't have. He's got something that none of the other priests have. No matter how learned we are, no matter how well studied we are, no matter how much we've meditated and burnt incense in the tabernacle, this guy's he's got something different. And so he asked Jesus for a little private meeting so he could ask him, like, where does your power come from? Like, how do you get to be you? And Jesus says, you must be born again. Born again, Nicodemus says. Like, I'm a grown man. Like, how could I ever crawl back into my mother's womb so that she could give birth to me again? Like, it's impossible. And Jesus says, I'm not talking about the fact that you're in need of another physical birth. Your mama already gave you a physical birth. He said, I'm talking about a birth in the spirit. You must be born again. Your mother got you here to planet Earth, but your second birth will get you into heaven. It's the birth of believing you are spirit. The mind is set up in such a way that we can only hold on to one truth at a time. That truth and its associated truths we can hold on to, but we can't hold that truth and an opposite truth or a very different truth. So I cannot hold on to the idea that I am sourced by Norma Jean Brandon Anderson and Laverne William Anderson Sr., and at the same time hold the idea that I am sourced by the Almighty One whom we've come to call God. I can't hold both of those thoughts. They're contradictory. So I'm either thinking that I, Carlos Wayne Anderson, standing before you, am the product of my physical mother and father, or I stand before you and go, I am sourced by the Almighty One, the invisible that we call God. So Jesus is saying, to think of your mom and dad as being your mom and dad, that's okay for your physical reality, for this incarnation. The song we sang at the beginning of the service, In Spirit I Am Free, the way to be free is to know that Norma Jean and Laverne did not source me. They got me my body temple. They got me my incarnation. They got me this ride for a while through this thing called life, but that I am sourced by God. Well, how does that happen? Well, I'll tell you, it happens by doing what we are doing. It happens every time we sing our joy songs. It happens every time the band starts playing their music and it carries us away. It happens when we have our meditations, our guided meditations, our silent meditations. It happens every single time we pray. It happens with all of our spiritual processes and all of the attention we give to spirit. What does that mean at a physical level? It means that our praise time is actually changing who we think we are. One more reason for us to always have our prayer requests not be things that bring us down back into physical reality and the tragedy of what is happening in politics and the tragedy of inequality and the tragedies of the murders and the wars and the whatever. That gets me locked into, oh yeah, I'm Norma Jean and Laverne's boy. I'm a physical person and life is rough. But if I want to know that I'm free in spirit, I have to figure out how to do that. Now, some people claim that our meditation time and our prayer time and our singing our joy songs is just a waste of time. Some people think that people who go to church are just lost, deluded. They've got it wrong, that God means nothing and thoughts of God mean nothing. But there's a guy that I heard about, like, I don't know, maybe 7 years ago, and his name is Andrew Newberg, and Andrew Newberg is a neuroscientist, and his colleagues wanted to study the effects of spiritual process on the brain. He wanted to study the effects of prayer and meditation and doing mantras and mudras and singing prayer songs and playing praise music. What are the effects on the brain, on the consciousness, on the sense of self? And so they began and are still doing research into the effects of what does spirituality do for the brain? What does religion do for the brain? One thing they notice is that when they studied the brain, people who were in prayer, or people who were singing praise songs, or people who were reading the scriptures, or people who were doing one thing, they noticed that when they looked at the brain was that the front lobe of the brain, the frontal lobe of the brain that had a lot of yellow before they started praying and praising, suddenly lit up with a lot of red. And that indicated that it increased the blood flow to the frontal lobe. And that's noticeable, but it's really no big deal, because the increased blood flow to that frontal lobe, that does happen with prayer and singing praise music, but it happens whenever the mind is engaged in any activity that requires concentration and full attention. And so that frontal lobe will fire up red if you're repeating the Lord's Prayer, or if you're singing a Hindu blessing, or if you're changing the oil in your car, or figuring out a new program on the computer, or learning a new language. So that doesn't really tell us much about the effects of prayer, except that it requires our full attention and our concentration, which increases the blood flow to the frontal lobe. What they discovered was that although that was of secondary importance, the primary important thing was that it does something to the back of the brain. In the back of the brain, on the left side, there is a lobe that's called the parietal lobe. What they noticed is that the parietal lobe is always pretty much fired up red. It's got a lot of blood flow going through it. The parietal lobe, it takes all of the stimulus in the world, everything you're encountering in the world, every person and everything that's going on, it takes it and it processes it to give a sense of self. It's a sense of self. It's how I get to know that I'm me and you're not. I'm this thing and I'm none of the other things. And so that gives us an identity. That gives us an incarnation. It gives us a name and a nature that allows us to be in this world and take care of ourselves. But this sense of self that it gives us is a self separate from all other selves. The way I know I'm me is to know I'm not you. And the way to know I'm this thing is to go, I'm not that thing. I'm none of these other things. This is who I am. And so the blood flow to the parietal lobe keeps me in an identification of being a self separate from all other selves. What he and his colleagues, Mr. Newberg and his colleagues, discovered in their years of researching the brain is that when we pray in any language and under the guidance and forms of all the religions, when we meditate, when we read scriptures, when we do our praise songs, when we lay hands on someone, when we give Reiki, when we send out positive vibes, when we play our instruments to stir up the spirit, what happens is that the parietal lobe goes from red to yellow. The blood flow to that lobe withdraws. It begins to shut down. The effects of that are that we lose our sense of being a self apart from all other selves. Now, I meditate a lot. I pray a lot. I sing praises a lot. I read a lot of spiritual material. I give Reiki. I lay hands on people. And so I'm shutting down the blood flow to that parietal lobe. And when I do, the reason why praising and doing our joy songs makes me feel so good is because it decreases my sense of being separate from all other selves. When it is shut down enough, we enter into what is called Christ consciousness. Christ consciousness is just the consciousness of being at one with all that is. We can call it super consciousness. We can call it divine consciousness. We can call it God consciousness. But Jesus, even though I meditate a lot and I pray a lot, I'm not even in the neighborhood of Jesus. Because I pray a lot and I read a lot and I meditate a lot and I do healing work a lot, but I also watch a lot of TV. And I go to a lot of movies.
Yep.
And I have a lot of conversations that have nothing to do with God or goodness. I mean, I'm a busy dude. I make God contact, but a lot of time I'm out there figuring out how I'm going to pay my bills and earning money. And so I'm locked into my physical reality. I'm managing relationships. I'm managing emotional energy. I'm managing what's going on in politics. I'm managing I'm managing the idea that there's nowhere safe in the world. Because you don't have to go to war to get shot. You can get shot going to the movies, or going into a restaurant, or going to a discotheque, or going to church. There's no safe place in the world. That parietal lobe is filled with blood. It is blazing red to tell me that I'm a self who has to protect myself. Well, I never read anywhere where Jesus went to any movies or watched television or hung around talking about something other than God. So when I think of He's us, I think He's me with my parietal lobe completely shut down. Because it gives me a sense of being other than you. When it's shut down, dagnabbit, I know I am you. And you are me. And we are one with the Creator and all of creation. That's what we're doing here in this church. If we need the science behind it, because sometimes it's helpful. Because as Jennifer, I believe it was said, sometimes invisible things are hard to grasp. So I loved it that Andrew Newberg and his colleagues did the study of the brain and informed me, Carlos, don't ever doubt the power of your praying. Don't ever doubt the power of your praising. Don't ever doubt what's going on when you're laying hands on somebody or giving them Reiki or simply having a powerful positive thought that you're extending. Let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me. You're not just talking talk, Jack. You're shutting down the parietal lobe. And when you shut that down, an automatic result is that you lose your sense of being a self separate from other selves. You know you're one with God. And you know you're one with everyone and with everything. Once more, this has been called super consciousness. It has been called God consciousness. It has been called oneness consciousness. It has been called Christ consciousness. It has been called the enlightened mind. It has been called the awakened mind. It doesn't matter what it's called by. It speaks to the same thing. That this idea that I'm me and you're not is something I'm making up. I'm making it up. We're all making it up. I'm me and I'm not you. It's a lie. But it's a necessary lie to keep us incarnated and to keep us safe from walking out in front of a Mack truck crossing a highway, to keep us from sticking our hand in a fire or laying it on top of a hot burner on the stove or walking right off the third floor roof. It keeps me incarnate. But while I'm here, Jesus said, you can be in the world and yet not of the world. That's what he means when he says, I'm everybody. Because your sense of self is just your sense of self. And through what we do here on Sundays and what you do every time you pray and every time you praise and every time you sing and every time you dance in the Spirit, is you simply are letting go of an illusion, which is the illusion that you are separate from the Creator and all of creation. Jesus had it right when he said that we are one. All of us are children of the Most High. And so if that's true, then my mother, Norma Jean, is not my mother. Not truly. She's my sister. And if I think Norma Jean is my mother and my source and the giver of my life, I will hold her accountable for not giving me every single thing I needed to be in heaven on planet Earth. But when I remember Norma Jean as my sister, who took on the role of mothering me, all I can do is give that child a high five. That's all I can. Oh my God. She took on the role of mothering me? Me? I give her a high five. My sister made her best effort to be my mother. I've got to bow to her. Did she fall short in some of my expectations? Everybody does. I fall short of my own expectations. Sure, Norma Jean did. But I've got to bow to her. She's my sister. I've told many people on Mother's Day, your mother, the one you call your mother, is your sister. And many times she's your younger sister. My mother didn't grow up with Dr. Phil and Oprah teaching her the things that young women today have been taught. My mother didn't grow up in a society where if someone hurt you, you told, you spoke about it, you released it. She grew up in a secret society where if people hurt you, you kept it to yourself. And whatever melodrama or psychodrama was going on in the family, you never told a soul. No. Mothers today, they have Dr. Phil looking right into their eyes on the screen, going, speak up. Your power is in your story. They have Oprah saying, don't beat your children. It never helps. Love them into greaterness. So some of our mothers were our little sisters doing the best they can to do the best they can. I honor them one by one.